Welcome back to Podcast and Chill, everyone. We are happy to see you again in this episode. It is always fun to talk about interesting things. Today, we are diving into a topic that touches all of our lives: hobbies.
Yeah, welcome back, guys. And honestly, I am so excited we are finally talking about this because, well, I have a bit of a controversial opinion. I genuinely think that about 90% of people today are picking the completely wrong hobbies. Like, they are literally just making themselves miserable in their free time.
Miserable? That is a really strong word, Jack. Hobbies are supposed to be the exact opposite of that, right? They are meant to help us relax, decompress, and express our creativity. Why do you feel like people are making themselves miserable?
Well, okay, think about the modern world for a second, Mira. Whenever someone asks you, hey, what do you do for fun? There is this weird, unspoken pressure to say something incredibly impressive. If I tell someone, oh, I'm learning Python, or I'm training for a half marathon, they look at me with total respect. But if I say, honestly, I just like sitting on my porch and watching the cars go by, people look at me like I am completely wasting my life.
I see exactly what you mean now. You are talking about the productivity trap. It is this modern obsession where even our leisure time has to have a measurable outcome or some sort of ROI, return on investment. We have somehow convinced ourselves that if a hobby does not make us smarter, fitter, or richer, it is not worth doing.
Exactly. Yes. And it doesn't stop there. It feels like every hobby nowadays has to become a side hustle. Like, my friend started baking sourdough bread during the pandemic, just for fun, right? Within 2 months, everyone was telling him, bro, you need to sell these. You should start an Instagram page, open an Etsy shop. And guess what? Now he absolutely hates baking. The joy is totally gone.
That is such a classic example. And honestly, it is a little heartbreaking. When you attach an external reward, like money or social media validation, to an internal passion, you completely change the psychology behind it. It shifts from intrinsic motivation, where you do it just for the pure joy of the activity, to extrinsic motivation. Suddenly, you are not baking because you love the smell of the dough. You are baking because you need to fulfill 3 orders by Tuesday. It becomes a job.
Oh man, yes. It becomes an obligation. And that is why I think people pick the wrong hobbies. They pick what looks good on a resume or an Instagram feed instead of what actually makes their soul happy. But, here's the thing I struggle with. How do you even know if you have picked the wrong hobby? Because sometimes learning something new is just naturally hard and frustrating at first, right? Like when I tried to learn the guitar, my fingers were bleeding and it sucked.
That is a wonderful question, Jack. There is a very fine line between the normal friction of learning a new skill and forcing yourself to do something you genuinely dislike. I think the key difference lies in something psychologists call flow state. Have you ever heard of that concept?
Flow state? I think I have heard the term thrown around in productivity podcasts, but I am not entirely sure what it actually feels like. Is it like being in the zone?
Exactly. Being in the zone. Flow state is that magical feeling when you are so completely immersed in an activity that you lose all sense of time. You are not thinking about your phone, you are not worrying about tomorrow's meeting, and you are not wondering what people will think of the final product. You are just present. When a hobby is right for you, even if the learning curve is steep and your fingers hurt with the guitar, you still experience flashes of that flow state.
Okay, wow. That makes a lot of sense. So when I was struggling with the guitar chords, I was frustrated, sure. But when I finally nailed that one transition in the song, man, time just vanished. I played it over and over for like 2 hours straight.
Right. That intrinsic reward was enough to keep you going. But contrast that with a hobby you are forcing. Let's say someone takes up reading classic literature just to seem smart at dinner parties. They sit down with a heavy book, and every 5 minutes they are checking their watch. They are counting the pages. There is no flow state there. It is pure willpower. And willpower is a limited resource. Eventually, it runs out and leads to burnout.
Oh, I am totally guilty of the book thing. I bought War and Peace like 3 years ago just to have it on my shelf. I think I read half a page. But it makes me wonder, is it bad to want to share our hobbies with other people? Like, part of the fun of playing guitar for me was the idea of eventually jamming with friends, or maybe impressing a girl at a campfire. Is that considered the wrong motivation?
Not at all, Jack. The social element is incredibly important. As humans, we are wired for connection. Hobbies are actually one of the most beautiful ways to bridge the gap between people. Think about a local gardening club, or a group of people playing Dungeons and Dragons on a Friday night. The issue isn't about sharing your hobby. The issue is when the performance of the hobby becomes more important than the experience of it.
Performance versus experience. So it is the difference between playing guitar to connect with people in the moment versus playing guitar just to record a TikTok video, hoping it gets 1 million views so you feel validated.
Precisely. When you do it to connect, you are still present in the experience. When you do it for the algorithm, you are entirely focused on the outcome. And if that video flops, suddenly you feel like a failure at your own hobby. That is when the hobby transforms into a source of anxiety. We have enough stress in our daily jobs. Why bring it into our sacred free time?
That is so deep, Mira. And it is honestly a huge trap. I see so many people falling into it, myself included. We are practically turning our relaxation time into a second shift at work. So let's say someone is listening to this right now, and they are realizing, oh no, I hate my hobbies. I'm just doing them for the aesthetic. How do they break out of that? How do you actually find a passion that is authentic to you?
That is the million-dollar question. And honestly, the first step is giving yourself permission to quit.
Wait, quit? Really? But society tells us quitting is for losers. Never give up, right?
Quitting a toxic job is a victory. Quitting a bad relationship is a victory. Quitting a hobby that drains your soul is absolutely a victory. You have to clear out the old, heavy furniture in your mind before you can bring in something new and light. Once you let go of the obligation, you create space for curiosity.
Wow. Okay. Clearing out the old furniture. I really like that analogy, actually. Because when I look at my garage right now, it is basically a graveyard of abandoned hobbies. I've got a dusty surfboard, some rollerblades, a half-finished woodworking kit, and honestly, every time I walk past them, I just feel this heavy wave of guilt.
And that guilt is exactly what we need to get rid of. Those items aren't failures, Jack. They are just data points. They are proof that you were curious enough to try something new. And now you have the data to know that woodworking or surfing isn't your ultimate flow state. But, well, let's talk about what happens after you clear out that mental space. How do you start over without falling into the exact same trap?
Yeah, that is the tricky part. Because, the moment I decide to try something new, my brain instantly goes into hustle mode. I'll be like, oh, I'll try photography. And 10 minutes later, I'm Googling how to make $10,000 a month selling stock photos. It is a sickness. How do I stop my brain from doing that?
It is very common, so don't be too hard on yourself. The trick is to establish a sandbox rule for any new hobby.
A sandbox rule. What do you mean? Like actually playing in the dirt?
Sort of. Think about kids in a sandbox. They build a sandcastle and then they immediately smash it. They don't care about preserving it, they don't care about selling it, and they certainly don't care about how the other toddlers are judging their architecture. The joy is entirely in the process of building and destroying. For the first 30 days of a new hobby, you have to stay in the sandbox. No monetizing, no social media posts, no telling people you are a photographer now. Just play.
Oh man, that sounds incredibly freeing, actually. No Instagram post for 30 days. That alone would probably weed out half the things I try to do. But what about the social aspect we talked about earlier? Because, well, some hobbies are inherently social, right? Like taking a class or joining a sports league. How do you balance the sandbox with wanting to connect with other humans?
That is a brilliant point to bring up. Connecting with others is actually one of the most fulfilling parts of having a hobby, as long as it's built on a shared passion, not shared competition. Take my pottery class, for example.
Oh, right, you do pottery. I completely forgot about that. Wait, did you start that just out of pure curiosity?
I did! I walked into that studio knowing absolutely nothing. And my first few bowls looked like, well, lumpy potatoes. But the magic wasn't in making the perfect bowl. The magic was sitting around a large wooden table with 5 strangers, our hands covered in clay, just talking about our days. There was no pressure to be the best potter in the room. We were just a community of people sharing a tactile, messy experience. That is how hobbies bridge generational gaps and cultural differences.
Wow. Okay, I love that. A community of lumpy potato makers. But seriously, that sounds amazing. It kind of reminds me of when I used to play pickup basketball at the local park. We didn't even keep score half the time. We were just running around, sweating and laughing. Compare that to some of these hyper-competitive amateur leagues now, where guys are acting like there are NBA scouts in the stands. It totally ruins the vibe.
Exactly. When competition replaces camaraderie, the hobby becomes a source of stress. The camaraderie is what makes you want to come back week after week. It is about finding your tribe, so to speak. And sometimes, finding that tribe takes a lot of trial and error. Which brings us to the next big hurdle people face: the fear of being a beginner.
Oh yes, the dreaded beginner phase. That is where I usually tap out. Honestly, it is just embarrassing to be bad at something as an adult. We spend all day at work being competent professionals, and then we come home and feel like clumsy idiots trying to knit a scarf or speak Spanish. It bruises the ego.
It really does. Our egos hate being vulnerable. But you have to reframe what being a beginner means. Being bad at something is actually a beautiful luxury. Think about it, Jack. Where else in your adult life are you allowed to make mistakes without any real-world consequences? If you mess up a spreadsheet at work, it's a crisis. If you drop a stitch while knitting, it's just a funky-looking scarf. Embrace the low stakes.
And the worst part is social media, right? Like, I start learning Spanish, and day 2, Instagram starts showing me these 20-year-old polyglots who speak 8 languages fluently. It is so demotivating.
Oh, the comparison trap. That is the fastest way to kill a budding passion. You are comparing your messy chapter 1 to someone else's polished chapter 20. What you don't see are the hundreds of hours they spent making embarrassing grammar mistakes. That is why I suggest keeping your new hobby offline entirely for a while. Protect it.
Embrace the low stakes. I need that tattooed on my forehead. You know, talking through this is making me realize how much unnecessary pressure I put on my free time. It is supposed to be free time. So if we were to give our listeners a step-by-step game plan, how do they actually start this reset process this weekend?
I love actionable steps. First, I would say, audit your current hobbies. Look at the things you do in your free time and ask yourself one brutal question. If I could never tell anyone I do this, would I still do it?
Oof, that is harsh, but incredibly necessary. If the answer is no, drop it immediately, right?
Precisely. Drop it without guilt. Second step. Write down a list of things you loved doing when you were 10 years old. Before you knew what a resume or a side hustle was, did you like catching bugs, drawing, riding bikes? Try to find the adult version of that pure, unadulterated play.
When I was 10, I was obsessed with building Lego spaceships. Like, I would spend hours just snapping pieces together. Maybe I don't need to learn a complex new language right now. Maybe I just need to go buy a massive Lego set and sit on my living room floor for a Sunday afternoon. Is that a valid hobby?
It is absolutely valid. It is tactile. It forces you to put your phone in another room, and it gets you into that flow state we talked about. That is the perfect example of the Sandbox rule in action. And the final step for our listeners would be commit to the 30-day Sandbox. Try it. Be messy. Be a lumpy potato maker. And most importantly, do not try to sell your Lego spaceship on the internet.
Deal. No Etsy shop for my Legos. This has been such a refreshing conversation, Mira. Honestly, it feels like a weight has been lifted. I feel like I finally have permission to just enjoy things again. So, guys, if you are listening to this and you feel that same relief, do us a huge favor.
Yes, please share your thoughts with us in the comments. What is a hobby you are going to drop today? Or what is a 10-year-old passion you want to rediscover? We read every single comment and we love hearing your stories.
And if this episode helped you reframe your mindset, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and it ensures you don't miss our next deep dive. Until then, go play in the sandbox, embrace being a beginner, and please stop trying to be productive every single second of the day.
Beautifully said, Jack. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep finding joy in the little things. Goodbye, everyone.